Okay, so you know how everyone's always talking about Stoicism these days? Like, control your emotions, be more disciplined.
Right.
It's everywhere.
It's like the philosophy of the moment or something.
Totally. But I've been thinking,
Yeah.
how many of us actually know what it's all about?
Besides the memes.
Yeah.
Be on the Instagram quotes, right?
Exactly. Like, where did Stoicism even come from?
Well, picture this.
Hmm.
Ancient Athens, the marketplace. It's bustling, right?
Oh, I can imagine. Crowded, loud.
Exactly. And right in the thick of it, you've got philosophers debating.
No way. So not like some quiet library or something.
This is street philosophy, public discussions, open to anyone. And that's where Stoicism got its start.
Wow, that's so cool. So who's the mastermind behind it all?
That would be Zeno of Citium.
Zeno.
Yeah. And get this, they called his school the Stoa Procili, which means, wait for it, the painted porch.
The Painted Porch. Okay, that's kind of a cool name, not gonna lie.
Right. Like way cooler than the Academy or something.
Totally.
But it wasn't all about the name, obviously. To really get Stoicism, you got to understand, the world, it came from the Hellenistic period. Think of it like this. After Alexander the Great conquers everything,
Right.
Greek culture explodes outward.
Mixes with all these other cultures.
Exactly. And intellectually, things are bubbling. Lots of different schools of thought clashing.
So like philosophy fight club.
Basically, you've got the skeptics who think we can't really know anything for sure,
Okay.
and the Epicureans who are all about seeking pleasure, but like in a wise and thoughtful way, not just,
Hedonism.
Yeah, exactly. So into this mix, you've got the Stoics carving out their own path. They loved Socrates, saw themselves as kind of inheriting his ideas, but
But with their own twist.
exactly.
So what was their big idea then? What did the Stoics actually believe?
Well, they broke it down into three main areas: logic, physics, and ethics.
Okay, so like the classic philosophical trifecta. Let's start with logic. What
Yeah.
did the Stoics have to say about that?
So we're not just talking common sense here. These guys, especially a guy named Chrysippus,
Chrysippus. Hadn't heard of him.
well, he's kind of a big deal in logic circles, like seriously influential. They were developing these complex systems of propositions and arguments.
Okay, you've officially lost me. Formal logic and we don't really get along.
It's intense stuff. But just know that Chrysippus, he was laying down the groundwork for how we understand arguments, even truth itself, even today.
Wow, okay, maybe Chrysippus deserves a bit more credit than he gets. But what about their physics? We talk in, like, atoms and cosmology here.
All right, so get ready for this. The Stoics, they were materialists.
Materialists. Wait, what does that mean again? It's been a while since my Philosophy 101 class.
So they believed that everything in the universe, and I mean everything, was ultimately physical, like made of matter.
Hold on, even like...
Even God, even the soul.
Yeah. Whoa. That's not what usually comes to mind when I think about ancient philosophy.
Right, it's pretty wild. But they believed in this force called logos, sometimes translated as word or reason. And for them, it was the active, intelligent principle behind the entire cosmos.
Okay, so it's like the universe is logical.
In a way, yeah. But here's the thing. They didn't see this logos as some separate deity, up in the heavens or whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't Zeus throwing lightning bolts.
Right.
They saw it as this all-pervading force, totally intertwined with matter itself. Like, think of it as the breath, the energy, the very fabric of existence. They even use the term pneuma to describe it.
Pneuma. I kind of like that. So if everything is made of the same stuff, this logos, how does that even work? Like, how can my messy desk and, like, the planets all be connected that way?
Well, that's where their idea of cosmic sympathy comes in, or sympathy, as they called it in ancient Greek.
Cosmic sympathy. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So because everything shares in this fundamental material, this logos, everything's interconnected, like deeply connected.
Okay, I'm getting some serious we are all connected vibes here. Like
Wow.
that butterfly effect thing, but on a cosmic level.
Exactly. And this idea of interconnectedness, it's huge for how they thought about ethics, which
Yeah.
is where things get really practical for us.
Right, bring on the ethics, because so far we've got these ancient philosophers hanging out on a painted porch talking about the universe being made of this logo stuff.
Right.
It's all very cool and mind-blowing, but how do we actually, like, live with that?
Exactly. So we've got this picture of the Stoic universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's material, it's governed by the logos, and everything is interconnected. The big question is, how do we fit into all of this? Us humans, with our messy lives and everything.
It's one thing to talk about cosmic reason, and it's another thing to, like, spill your coffee on yourself before a big meeting.
Right. And that's where ethics comes in. The Stoics believed the goal of life was to live in agreement with nature. And now we understand that means aligning ourselves with this universal reason, this logos that we've been talking about.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess, in theory. But how do you actually do that? Especially when you're, like, stressed out or things aren't going your way.
Well, for them, it was all about virtue. And here's a key difference between the Stoics and some other schools of thought. They believed that virtue was the only true good.
The only good. Come on, there's got to be more to life than that, right?
Not that the other stuff wasn't important, they just saw it differently. They called things like wealth, health, even happiness, indifference.
Indifference, so they were indifferent to being happy. That's kind of a bummer, isn't it?
No, it's not that they didn't care. They recognized what they called preferred indifference.
Preferred indifference. Okay, now you're just messing with me right
No,
now.
seriously, it's like, yeah, it's obviously preferable to be healthy rather than sick, right? Or to have financial security or loving relationships.
Right, of course.
But they were really aware that those things don't guarantee happiness. They don't define your worth as a person.
So it's not about ignoring the good things or becoming some kind of, like, emotionless robot. It's more about not pinning all your hopes on external things that you can't ultimately control.
You got it. It's about focusing on what you can control, your own actions, your judgments, your responses to what life throws at you, and accepting what you can't.
It's like that Marcus Aurelius quote, right? Accept humbly, let go easily. Powerful stuff. But here's a question. If we're living in this universe where everything's determined by the logos, what about free will? Do we actually have a choice in how we act?
That's a great question. It's like the ultimate philosophical debate. The Stoics, they were determinists, meaning they believed everything happens for a reason, the future is set.
Right. Destiny, fate, all that.
But here's the thing, and this is where it gets really interesting. They also believed in moral responsibility.
Now, hold on. How can you have both? How can everything be predetermined, but we're still responsible for what we do?
It's a concept called compatibilism, and it basically says that determinism and free will, they aren't mutually exclusive. They can coexist.
Okay, you're going to have to explain this one because my brain is officially fried. How can both of those things be true at the same time?
Think about it this way. Imagine a cylinder rolling down a hill.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The cylinder's going to roll because of its shape, because of gravity. That's like the external cause is shaping our lives, the things we can't control.
Right.
But the cylinder's inner nature, like what it's made of, how much it weighs, that also plays a part in how it rolls.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So our inner nature,
Mm.
our character, our values, all it shapes how we respond to things,
Yeah.
even that those things are, in a sense, predetermined.
Okay, so you're saying even if there's this cosmic plan, the way we react to it is still up to us.
Exactly. It's a tricky concept, and it's something philosophers are still debating. But for the Stoics, it meant that even though we might not be able to control everything that happens to us, we still have a responsibility to make the best choices we can, given our nature, to act virtuously, to live in accordance with that logos.
So it's less about just sucking it up and pretending bad things don't affect us, and more about understanding our place in the big picture and trying to act from a place of, like, wisdom and virtue.
You got it. And it's important to remember that the Stoics weren't emotionless robots.
Yeah.
They knew we experience a whole range of emotions, right?
Yeah.
Distress, fear, lust, delight.
The whole shebang.
But they saw these as judgments about what's really important in life.
It's like that whole thing about getting upset over spilled coffee.
Exactly.
In the grand scheme of things.
Not a big deal. A Stoic might still feel frustrated by the spilled coffee.
Yeah.
They're human, right?
Yeah.
But they wouldn't let it control them. They'd use reason, understand that spilled coffee is ultimately and indifferent.
And focus on what they can control, which is
Cleaning it up and moving on.
exactly. So it's really about self-control, but not in a restrictive, deny your feelings way. More like learning to understand your emotions through the lens of reason.
You've got it. It's about learning to align your inner world with that larger cosmic order. And this might sound familiar because this idea of understanding and managing your emotions, it's a cornerstone of a lot of modern therapy.
You know what? You're right. It's starting to sound a lot like what I've learned about cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Is there a connection there?
You're way ahead of me. That's exactly where we're headed next. The Stoics might have been chilling in ancient Athens, but their ideas about virtue, reason, managing your emotions, they've had a surprising impact on modern therapy, especially CBT. But we'll dive into that more in part 3 of our Stoic Deep Dive.
You know, it's funny to think we started with Stoicism memes, and now I feel like I've gone down this whole rabbit hole of ancient philosophy and cosmic connections. It's pretty wild.
Well, like I said, there's more to Stoicism than meets the eye. But it's true. It's amazing how much depth there is to this philosophy. And it's not just some abstract theory either. It was always meant to be a way of life.
Totally. A philosophy for everyday living.
Exactly. And speaking of living a Stoic life, a lot of what we know about that actually comes from the Roman Stoics. Guys like Seneca, Epictetus.
Oh, and Marcus Aurelius, right, with his meditations and all that.
Exactly. Their writings are full of practical advice and insights, almost therapeutic in a way.
Which makes sense when you think about the world they were living in. I mean, talk about pressure, political intrigue, the possibility of getting exiled or, like, assassinated.
Right.
I feel like I'd be reaching for some stoic wisdom, too, if I lived back then.
Just to stay sane.
Totally. And the amazing thing is how relevant their writing still feels today. Like, for example, remember we were talking about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yeah.
Well, it actually draws a lot from Stoic principles.
Seriously. You're telling me there's a direct connection between some ancient philosophy and, like, a therapy that's used by millions of people today? 100%. It's all about that Stoic idea of challenging your thoughts, your perceptions. Remember that Epictetus quote, "It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them."
Oh, yeah, I remember that. So you're saying that's basically CBT right there.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
Right. It's like instead of getting totally carried away by a negative thought, a
You
feeling.
learn to kind of step back.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
observe it, you question it, you realize, hey, this is just a thought, a product of my mind. It might not even be true.
That's so powerful. It's like reclaiming your inner world, just like the Stoics were talking about all those centuries ago. And to think they didn't even have therapists back then.
Right. They had to figure it out on their own. And that's the thing about these deep dives, isn't it?
What's that?
We uncover these hidden connections between these ancient ideas and the modern world.
It's amazing. Like these powerful ideas, they never really go away.
They just, they evolve, they pop up in different forms.
It makes you realize we're not so different from those philosophers hanging out on their painted porch after all.
Totally. We're all just trying to figure out how to live a good life. So, has anything from our Stoicism deep dive really resonated with you?
You know that phrase, living in agreement with nature, it's really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's a powerful one.
It's so simple, but when you really think about it, it's really profound. It makes you question your place in the world, how your actions line up with something bigger than yourself.
I totally agree. It's a good one to meditate on, that's for sure. For me, though, it's got to be that Stoic emphasis on focusing on what you can control. Your actions, your judgments,
Hmm.
and letting go of the rest.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, especially in today's world where everything feels so chaotic.
Right. Learning to focus on what you can influence, that's a superpower.
Totally. Well, listeners, if you're feeling inspired to dive deeper into Stoicism, we've got you covered. Check out our show notes for links to works by Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius.
We've also got some great resources on cognitive behavioral therapy if you're curious about exploring those connections between ancient wisdom and modern therapy.
Because who knows, maybe those ancient Stoics were onto something. And that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep asking those big questions.